Hello and welcome to another episode of the Startup Operator Roundup. I'm Roshan and
And I'm Gunjan Saha, and together we'll be discussing the biggest headlines from India's growing startup. Right. From Bharat's growing startup ecosystem.
That's right.
If you're joining us for the first time, please consider subscribing to this channel for regular updates from this community. And this week we have quite a lot of interesting topics to discuss. First off, we'll talk about Pharmeasy's down round. Now, Pharmeasy, which was a unicorn, saw their valuations drop from $5 billion to just 500 million.
Wow.
They lost 90% of the valuation overnight. Then we have Koo, which is a social media platform that came into prominence a few years back. They are now exploring a strategic sale as funding now becomes out of reach. Then we have this whole war brewing up against fintech companies for dominating the POS machines market or the POS machines. Then Hero MotoCorp has finalized a 900 crore infusion into Ather. We'll be discussing some key updates which NPCI made at the recently concluded Global Fintech Festival. And along with that, we'll discuss the fundraisers of the week. So stay tuned as we break these headlines for you. Okay, so currently the G20 meet is underway in Delhi, and from what I hear, the entire city has been converted into a fortress. There are fighter jets, there are helicopters patrolling the skies. It seems like it's pretty exciting time in the city.
Yeah, so we've had plenty of world leaders descend on New Delhi, right? I mean, we have the US President, Mr. Joe Biden. We have our own British Prime Minister, Mr. Rishi Sunak, who I think India will adopt as its official son-in-law, right? Damaji. Major Damaji feels. And then we have Emmanuel Macron of France. We have Giorgio Meloni of Italy. Canada's Justin Trudeau as well. Plenty of others. I think fantastic updates from day one of the G20 itself. We've been able to garner a consensus, which is kind of huge, right? And this includes on the war in Ukraine. Right, and there's a global biofuel alliance that's been formed. This is to ensure blending of ethanol and petrol, 20% blending of ethanol and petrol. Again, on similar lines, there have been a lot of these sustainability goals that have been discussed and agreed upon. I think to me, the major highlight is this whole Europe, India, and Middle East economic corridor that's been mooted, right? So this is again fantastic. It will mean a lot of trade, and as the Prime Minister put it, I mean, it will also develop trust between the countries. So overall, fantastic developments from the G20. We're pending day 2. Let's see what happens. But again, great work to all of the organizing team members. This is a fantastic achievement, I should say. Even though we got this on a rotational basis, I think we've made the most of it.
And for those who want to explore these topics in more depth, you should definitely check out Roshan's other podcast, Bharatvaarta, where they discuss more about policy and culture. We'll put a link in the description, so you can check it out for more insights. But for now, let's get started for the updates of the week. The rights issue will slash Pharmeasy's worth from $5.6 billion to $500 to $750 million. The rights issue will help Pharmeasy to pay off its $250 million loan from Goldman Sachs, avoid equity conversion, and clear its liabilities for buying out companies such as Thyrocare, Acnomed, and Marg ERP in 2021. So, from what we understand, right, the investors really had to choose between two bad decisions.
Yeah.
Where either they had to accept a level of dilution that would almost vaporize their entire investment, or continue pumping money to a startup that is not generating any money.
I mean, actually, it's like 3 bad options, right? So, a couple of the ones that you mentioned, and third, see some of the debt convert into equity, right? All in all, a pretty bad time, right? And they, suppose they've chosen the least bad thing they could do, right? So, Pharmeasy is a classic case of growing too fast, too soon. 2021, they became a unicorn, was worth about $1 billion in April. And then just a few months down the line, they were worth $5 billion magically, right? They raised a ton of money and they made all of these acquisitions, right? Now, all of this sounds a bit familiar if you think of Byju's and so on, right? They made 3 large acquisitions. The largest among them was Thyrocare, which they acquired for something like 4,500 crores or something, right? And since, the promoter, the team has kind of like moved on as well, Mr. Velumani. right? And all of this was built on the optimism of this whole um, COVID healthcare boom, right? Which is that a lot of people are booking tests online, a lot of health services are going to move online, and we're going to be this large online pharmacy, kind of a tent. We're going to offer diagnostics, medical supplies, etc., etc., all of these things, and we're going to take a huge portion of that market, which is offline, online, right? But that has kind of tapered off, post COVID. So that is tapered off. The margins are down as well. I mean, it's come down from 40-50% to about 15 to 20% now, right? And they've continued to expand in all of this rather fast, rather quickly, in terms of number of cities, number of offerings, and so on, right? And see, these services are not something that lends itself to a meaningful upsell or cross sell as well. Like, how many times are you going to take a blood test,
Right.
or check your kidney function or liver function or whatever, right? I mean, most of us do it when we're pressed to it, right? When something happens and a doctor advises that you should do it. So yeah, it's not something you can sell like clothes or shoes, right? So they're just realizing the nuances of the business, but to their misfortune, I mean, they're at a stage where they're so large that some of these smaller errors also compound, and it's a
Right.
huge impact, right? I mean, they have made strides in terms of improving their economics, and tried to be a bit profitable and so on, right? But really, they will have to hope really hard for the IPO market to return, in the next year or so, to really be able to raise more cash infusion, because I don't know if they're going to get any more from the current investors. So let's see. But to clarify, right? I mean, the whole online pharmacy space, I think it is still viable, right, if you
Yeah.
operate in a sensible manner.
Hmm.
So let's hope that the greater focus on operating sustainably, growing sustainably, means that Pharmeasy will be able to build a viable business in this space.
Right. The fundamentals of the business are still intact, and they'll have $100 million left in the bank after clearing the debt with Goldman Sachs and the rest. So yeah, at least we won't see the company disappear in a week or two.
Hopefully not. Yeah.
Another application that really gained popularity during the whole lockdown phase, especially with the Twitter fiasco going on, was Coup. They saw support from government officials, cricketers, actors, actresses, and you name it.
Hey, and me also. I mean, I also posted a few updates on Coup.
Coup is valued at 2,230 crores or $268 million, but has only 20 crore rupees or $2.4 million left in the bank. It is expected to sell a significant discount to its previous valuation. Coup has approached Twitter backed ShareChat, Microsoft's LinkedIn, and other players for a possible deal. Their monthly active users have dropped from 4.5 million to 1.7 million since January 2021. They have fired 30% of its staff and is testing various models to monetize the platform. Um, but what will be interesting here to explore is that what actually led to the decline. Were
Mm.
people just bored of the platform, or was it functionality, the user experience was not at par, or something else? What do you think?
See, this is a very, very, very difficult space to execute, right? We all have that whole Clubhouse example from, about a year and a half back. Who even remembers Clubhouse now, right? They just peaked, and then, pretty soon they were nowhere. They kind of petered out, right? Think of Facebook's threads, right?
Hmm.
Facebook is not able to make this successful, right? I mean, it's a super difficult space to operate in because of two things. One is network effects, which means how many of you and your friends are on the platform. That is one thing, right? And second, engagement, right, which is how much of engagement is happening, how many people are really posting, and how many people are reacting to the posts and whatnot. And third is content, right? I mean, where is the best quality content? For all of its ills, right, Twitter has the latest news, right?
Yeah.
And Twitter has the most unique perspectives. Or think of Reddit, right? Why is Reddit even a thing? Reddit is even a thing because of all the crazy zany ideas that you find there, right? From conspiracy theories to
Mm.
whatnot.
So it's like the news breaks on Twitter,
Mm.
it spreads on Twitter, and then discussion of the news happens on Reddit.
Maybe that, right? Or I mean, you have a certain, like a culture to a Reddit user, right? There are
Mhm.
a certain type of people who like Reddit, right? So it's very difficult to build one of these platforms, insanely difficult. I saw a tweet by Preetham, who's the former founder of Munch, that we built something like this in 2016, and we very quickly came to the hypothesis that in fact, they built an anti-hypothesis that, hey, this is not going to work, and they wound up even with money in the bank. you know so it is a very difficult space to execute in, and props to the founder Aprameya for trying, and I still hope that they kind of succeed, but it's a very difficult thing, and monetization is a whole other aspect, right? I mean, we're still talking about growth. You look at some of the journeys of whether it's Chingari or ShareChat, some of the native Indian social platforms, they've struggled with that as well. Either they've gotten scale,
Hmm.
or they've not been able to monetize sufficiently enough. So it's something that is to be figured out. Last week I said Uber is not, sorry, Ola is not India's Uber, and Flipkart is not India's Amazon. But in this case, somehow, Twitter is India's Twitter, and
Who is India's Twitter?
at least was, right, or
Hmm.
supposed to be. But then Twitter is India's Twitter, and Facebook is India's Facebook, and whatever else, Instagram is India's Instagram so far. I will be rooting for someone to build an uniquely Indian platform, and really hope that they will succeed. So I have my thoughts and prayers with the coup team for sure. I mean, I really hope that they're able to come out of this, and they're going to make it big. Let's see.
Yep. Okay, so another interesting space to watch out for is the whole POS machine space. We have seen like how all the fintechs, PhonePe, Paytm, they're all vying to install the soundbox machines. Joining that fight, PhonePe launched a new feature on its smart speaker POS device,
Mm.
which allows merchants and customers to hear the transaction confirmations read out in Amitabh Bachchan's voice.
Yeah, I heard that, and it's super gimmicky, super tacky, but it's amazing.
Yeah, but if you just look at the space, right? After lending, these soundbox POS devices have become the battleground between Paytm, PhonePe, Pine Labs, and BharatPay.
Yeah,
And we have seen like how Paytm has really capitalized on the opportunity. It helped scale its merchant lending business loans 178% year on year. And while they don't lend from its own books, they lend it for a partner bank, and on that they earn a percentage share, right? And that's well keeping Paytm
yeah.
fundamentals strong. And now we are seeing other fintech companies coming into this space. So, what do you think what changes will we see here?
See, payments is the tip of the spear, right? Nobody is going to make money on payments alone, right? They either have to layer software or financing. Now, software as well. Well, Indian SMBs, are not very used to paying for software, I would say. I mean,
Yeah.
definitely things have improved over the last 5-10 years, and props to all of the entrepreneurs who've caused that change, right? But the major game here is financing, right? So how do you get to the books of the shops and shopkeepers and whatnot, right? So Paytm has its soundbox. Pine Labs has launched Mini.
So while Paytm directly doesn't lend money to its borrowers from their own books, but what they do is they tie up with partner banks, and by facilitating this transaction, Paytm earns a commission. How do you think this space is going to evolve?
Well, see, payments is the tip of the spear, right? I mean, not anyone is going to make actual money on payments,
No.
right? The real game is to layer software and financing, and on that front also, Indian SMEs don't really pay for software. Well, I mean, the situation has certainly improved over the last 5-10 years, and again, props to the entrepreneurs and businesses who have caused that sort of a behavioral change, who have invested in that. But the major game here is financing, right? And here, obviously, all of these folks are partnered with other banks or NBFCs to sort of lend, right? I mean, apart from BharatPay, which has a license of its own, who can forget their acquisition of PMC with Centrum, right? I don't know if that's still valid, if the license is
These
still.
companies are now applying for a payment aggregator license, and
Yeah, a lot of these folks will be
yeah.
applying for the payment aggregator license also. Paytm, of course, has a Paytm Bank, the Payments Bank license. Now, each of these has nuances in terms of what they can or cannot do. But if you have to lend, you obviously have to be a recognized financial entity, right? And this is beyond just how a fintech operates. So that being the case, I mean, everyone is trying to get in the books of the SME or the shopkeeper, right? So which is why, I mean, you have Paytm's Soundbox, you have Pine Labs' Mini, you have Bharat Pay as well with its own machines, and so on and so forth, right? So very popular among these modes is the whole UPI transaction. You show a scan, you show a code. And so very popular among this is the whole mechanism of someone showing you a QR code and then you scan, you pay through UPI. But what these guys have started doing is also enabling credit card payments. Now, some of these machines can accept credit card payments via NFC, right? Which is that you actually have to tap your card only, right? But then, I mean, there's a certain limit of about 5,000 rupees, if I'm not mistaken, for up to which, I mean, you can do that, right? Beyond that, you have to swipe, and this is an RBI mandate. If you look at the average sort of ticket price for when someone uses UPI versus when someone uses something like credit card, UPI is around 600 something, and credit card maybe around 3,500 or maybe around 3,500, right? And that is the major difference, right? Because people want consumers to spend more, which is why they're enabling all of these credit cards and so on, right? So interesting times for sure. I mean, this is increasing digital access for sure, right? I mean, we're going into the heartland of India, enabling all of these shopkeepers to accept payments digitally, which is fantastic. And also, we've made the point often that India is extremely credit starved, right? All of our businesses need to get money to grow and expand at reasonable rates, and all of these large banks or even the NBFCs cannot be the only ones sort of pushing for that, right? I mean, you need other financial entities who can operate at different levels, right? So all in all, I think it's great for the Indian merchant, it's great for the Indian consumer, and I'm really excited for this space.
Yeah, and recently at the Global Fintech Festival, there were a lot of new announcements made by NPCI around UPay to make it more user friendly, increases adoption, and increases reach as well. So we'll be getting to that. But before that, people, if you're enjoying this content, please consider liking this video so that the algorithm will recommend more such topics to you. And if you really, really like the video, then consider subscribing for regular updates. Moving to our next topic, Hero Motocorp will inject 550 crore rupees into Ather Energy through a rights issue. Hero already owns a 33% stake in the e-scooter startup. Ather next plans for external fundraising and opted for an internal round instead, as this move is seen as a sign of confidence in the company's future prospects. Ather's losses increased by 151% to 865 crores for the year ended March 31, 2023, but revenue surged by nearly 5 times to 1,806 crores, according to Hero's annual report. Now, while the increase in losses may seem concerning, the significant growth in revenues is a positive sign for Ather's future profitability. But can you help us understand how this significant revenue growth might translate into future profitability, especially given the substantial increase in losses over the same period?
See, it's a very capex heavy industry, right? Obviously, you have to set up manufacturing, you have to set up engineering, you have to set up distribution, all of these things. And these things over a period of time kind of average out and your unit economics kind of improve, right? And don't forget that Ather is quite literally creating a new category, right? EV, when Ather started was, as Tarun mentions, it was a lost continent, right? And now when you're seeing so much of madness and craze around it, right? But, with the FAME 2 subsidies soon going out, it'll be difficult for sure, right? I mean, it'll be difficult to sort of balance things out and execute. And perhaps why, I mean, they're kind of taken this cash infusion, right? And, it's very interesting also that Hero is funding them. Because this is in direct competition to Hero's own electric.
They launched this brand called Hero Vida.
Yeah, exactly, right? So I think the perhaps the thinking there is to kind of hedge their bets, and we might see some consolidation sometime in the future. But although I think Ather has a clause in terms of capping Hero's investments in Ather, right? I mean, in terms of how much they can invest. So all in all, I think, look, this is a engineering marvel, right? I mean, if you've ridden some of these electric bikes and whatnot, right? I mean, there's fundamental innovation on bike, battery, everything, right? And the ecosystem itself.
Right.
So I really hope that these guys can build out large businesses going out in the future. So all the best to the Ather team.
You said that by investing in Ether, Hero is hedging their bets. But I think considering that EV is still a new category in India, you have to start building grounds up. You don't not only have to build the vehicle itself, but you have to build the infrastructure to support the service centers, the battery recharge stations, and the likes. And for a single company to do that might be a mammoth task. But if companies get together to build out at least an ecosystem, it becomes easier to start selling and focus on profitability. So I think that also could be one of the reasons.
Yeah, absolutely. And all of the incumbent large players have got in the market finally, right? I mean, whether it's Hero, TVS, and so on. So yeah, I mean, this is one of those things where the genie is out of the bottle, right? I mean, we are going to have electric bikes and cars on the road. There's no going back.
Yeah. All right, now let's move on to some of the key announcements which NPCI made at the recently concluded Global Fintech Festival. Number one was instant credit via UPI. This feature allows users to access pre-approved credit lines from the banks through UPI without needing a credit card. So, for example, if you have linked your UPI account to your bank, you can get instant credit for online shopping or making some bill payments. I think this is going to be really big. But the other features, there's UPI Lite X, which is designed to bring digital payments to remote locations. It enables users to send and receive money through UPI without needing an internet connection. So one benefit I definitely see out of this is paying through UPI on your flights,
Right.
which is currently just by credit cards. Then there is UPI Tap and Pay, which introduces near-field communications. Then there's Hello UPI, which enables voice-enabled payments through UPI apps, telecom calls, and IoT devices. So similar to a Google Assistant or a Siri. So it's interesting. We are coming at par not only with traditional transaction mechanisms, but also the new tech-led like Google Assistant and Siri. So interesting to see how this will shape up, especially in the context for India.
See, UPI is clocking some 10 billion transactions a month, right? And I think UPI 2.0 made it quite clear that, the roadmap, how they're looking at it, is a complete financial management system, right? So loans, personal finance, and so on and so forth, right? So there is still a lot of things that can be built on top of UPI for sure, right? I mean, we just discussed those POS machines and whatnot. That is an innovation on the merchant side. So yeah, there's just a lot of things that are still left, and that whole UPI Lite thing reminds me, right? I mean, I was reading this book called Alchemy by Rory Sutherland, which is an amazing book. It's the most gifted book from my end, right? I mean, I've given it to God knows how many people.
There are 4 copies of this book in my house.
Yeah, it's truly fantastic. It's one of those books that I think changes the way you think. So definitely check out Alchemy by Rory Sutherland. He says a lot of these innovations that were designed for disabilities or constraints, right, tend to become mainstream at some point of time, because he gives the example of, let's say, I mean, you're holding a couple of mugs or something. Technically, I mean, you can't use your arms, right? So designing for when you can't use your arms, simple things like, your doors and yeah, exactly, right, becomes mainstream often. And similarly, you can apply it to constraints as well, right? I mean, you spoke about, low internet or no internet. Now there are cases, I mean, in Bangalore city for sure, there are drops in the internet, right? Or when you're traveling by train or flight or whatever, there's surely no internet. So all of these cases, could apply to those as well, right? So yeah, I mean, I'm super excited for what else is going to come on the whole UPI roadmap. So this is awesome.
Right. Last week really did not see much of action within the fundraiser space, but here is what stood out for us. Pepperfry raised $23 million in a fresh round from existing investors, institutions, and family offices. And B2B fish and seafood startup Captain Fresh. They raised $20 million as part of an extended Series C round, which was led by Japan's SBI Investment and Evolvence Capital.
Hmm. Good to see family offices are investing for sure.
Yeah.
I hope they've not been freaked out by all of the 2021 froth and the lack of compliance afterwards, right? So yeah, but good to see that family offices are pretty active.
Right. Okay, for the talk of the town section, there's this very interesting section from Kunal Shah's fireside chat where he says, "Stop worshipping unicorns as they are mythical, celebrate risk takers." Here's a clip of the video.
Is this the unintended consequence of too much money that's come into the,
absolutely,
into the
and
ecosystem?
worship?
And how do you unlearn this? How do you unlearn worshipping unicorns?
Because they are mythical.
Roshan, what do you make of that?
Well, it's hard to comment because Kunal is the thing that he says you should not worship, right? And I think he definitely has a point, right? Look, I've been in the startup ecosystem for the last 15 years, and in the early days, the startup scene felt like a goth band or something, right? I mean, hardly anyone knew or cared too much about it. And we were personally thrilled when capital came in, right? I mean, I remember, when Flipkart raised from Axel back in I think it was 2007, 2008. That was a big deal, right? We all sat up and we all celebrated because this was formal recognition of the Indian startup ecosystem. And since then, we've come a long way. And Kunal's point is valid, right? At some point of time, I mean, it's become that you can't start a business without funding, or that funding is so essential to start a business. Now, I understand if you're operating in deep tech, or if you're taking on some of the larger folks in a particular industry, etc. Right? I mean, capital may become a necessary condition in some of those, in some of those cases, and even in those cases, if you're smart about using your resources, look at Ather, for example. We discussed them here, right? I mean, their first real funding was about 5 lakhs. And in their first year they built about 4 prototypes. I mean, it's phenomenal, right? So if you are scrappy, if you are resourceful, if you're innovative, you can definitely get past that. And that is what startups are expected to do, right? I mean, you're supposed to be innovative about everything, not just about the engineering aspects, but even the commercial, the business aspects as well, right? So somewhere this whole notion of funding becoming a precondition to building and scaling a startup